It's time to talk about that one awkward topic that everyone wants to talk about, but is afraid to. Cancel culture. Yes, it's another day, another week, and someone in pop culture somewhere is being canceled because a mob of people on social media didn't like what they said. And for too long, we as a society have been okay with this because at its core, the tenets of cancel culture seem to make sense. Someone has said something reprehensible, and we as a society pressure corporations and government to remove people like that from the spotlight, or else we will not give them our financial support. Seems to make sense, doesn't it? Well, like most roads to hell, cancel culture is paved with good ideas. However, in the last decade or so, we have seen an unholy marriage of social media and corporations with loud and angry voices. While their views weren't necessarily the views of everyone, regardless of their political stance, the loudest voices often drown out the rational and passive voices. We have seen cancel culture eliminate people for expressing opinions that they don't like, for being different. In an age where we're supposed to be tolerant of difference, the one thing we can't tolerate is a different opinion. Now, I know what you're going to say, but Jack, that's politics. This is pop culture. We don't care about any of that stuff. And that's exactly my point. See, it doesn't just grow with politics. It usually starts fermenting in pop culture. The internet has been a mainstream arena for nearly 20 years. But rather than building bridges and creating forums for an exchange of ideas, it has become a hate-filled cesspool where people bully, harass, and threaten each other. Don't you wonder why violence has been escalating over the last few years? How could this happen in 21st century America, or even this? Well, because it usually starts here. See, the anonymity of the internet is like a breeding ground for anger. And while its vein has been in politics since the very first civilization, it gets a lot of practice on internet forums. Talk to Star Wars fans or even Star Trek fans, or talk to DC fans who hate the Snyderverse, or even, as I hate to admit it, talk to fans who support the Snyderverse. It never stays civil. It never comes to an intellectual commonplace. It becomes a vitriolic exchange of hate, not an exchange of ideas. So once you have put down your angry comments in a thread, do you think it just stays there? Do you think that anger just sits there? No. It lingers. It boils. And it's human nature that we as people at some point erupt. But what's the underlying root cause of this? What is the underlying root cause of all this anger? And what does it have to do with cancel culture? Well, it's simple. We as millennials and Gen Z have a very big problem. We can't accept a point of view that is different than ours. So we seek out to destroy people who don't agree with us. And we are under the illusion that if we remove and destroy that person, we will make the world better. But in reality, we just do it to make ourselves feel better. And I've been guilty of this myself, because no matter how many people you remove or cancel, the underlying issue remains the same. We can't accept different points of view, and we'll just move on to the next person. Take this person. I knew she was a conservative and a Trump supporter well before she popped up on The Mandalorian. I know that many of her views are antithetical to my own, but when I saw her show up on a Star Wars show, do you know how much sleep I lost? Zero. Absolute zero. Because as someone who has been mostly thin-skinned all his life, I had to learn the hard way that people will have different views and preferences that aren't my own. Tolerance and acceptance of different ideas are something that we preach, we don't practice. We preach it about religion, we preach it about race and gender, and we should keep preaching it about those things. But if you take two people who don't agree about Star Wars and put them in a room, it becomes just as hateful as any of the violence we have seen in the last few years. But now, I find myself defending someone who I don't agree with, not to save her job or because I think she's hot. Sorry, where was I? Oh, yes. Not to save her job because I think she's hot, but because I believe in the fundamental ability to accept that she, and many like her, have different views than me and millions of other people in America and across the globe. There was once a fundamental principle that defined Americanism, coined by the French Enlightenment author Voltaire. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. It meant we will disagree over religion, over politics, over ideologies, but you have the right to say it. Take, for instance, this guy. I vehemently disagree with him over Snyder and the DCEU. In fact, I even teased him a bit last week on our show. However, I do not want him canceled, nor do I want him taken down. Why would I want that? Am I so insecure that I can't stand someone having a different opinion than me? In fact, if some of my allies in the Restore the Snyderverse movement were to attempt to take him down, I would gladly stand by him because his right to an opinion is no more or less important than mine. We in pop culture and society in general need a strong therapy session to evaluate why we can't stand others' opinions. I get it. It sucks. My own co-host thinks The Last Jedi is good. I think it killed Star Wars in a way that no matter how great it could become, The Last Jedi did irreparable damage to a franchise that even the prequels didn't. But does this mean that I should have him removed or taken down? No. That's a ludicrous idea. But I see it happening everywhere else all the time. Defending someone's right to an opinion is not an endorsement of that person's opinion. There are many in Hollywood whose opinions and views I strongly disagree with, but I don't want them taken down or destroyed, nor do I even stop viewing their films. You see, art is meant to challenge us, and sometimes challenging work can come from people who are equally challenging. Free speech is a core principle of this idea, but today I see people going after free speech, and yes, I get it. The people who are being canceled hold views that a lot of other people wouldn't accept, including myself. However, what happens on the day when the power shifts, as it always does, and that microscope is focused on you because you said the wrong thing, because you expressed an opinion that the mob didn't like? Remember last week when I showed you these three men? They were killed because others couldn't stand their opinions. Now, I'm not equivocating those great men with the victims of cancel culture, but the root problem is the same behind what happened to them and canceling them. People can't stand opinions that are not their own, and this is not conducive to a civilized society. I'm not done with this topic by a long shot, and I will continue this rant probably in another segment or two, or many more. But I do want to end with a story of something that happened to me. I was at a venue hosting trivia one night and was told by the bar manager not to approach someone who comes here. They called him Nazi Bill. He was an old man approaching 90. I, being myself, went over to talk to him after Quizzo to see if he would play Quizzo next week. What followed was interesting. He admitted that he legit loved Hitler and was a huge fan of fascism. No apologies on his end. I wasn't scared. I wasn't upset. I just knew that what he believed didn't affect my ability to value myself. We spoke civilly for about an hour about freedom, choice, liberty, and a plethora of other issues. We never raised our voices at each other or lost our tempers. At the end of the night, he put his arm around me and bought me a beer. Now, I have no idea if I changed his mind at all. But the fact that he said he believed things that he did, yet we could still have a civil conversation, told me the power of being calm in a combustible situation. And the fact that in the few times we have seen each other since that night, he always shakes my hand. Maybe the lesson is that in order to change each other's mind, or at least begin to affect change, we don't cancel each other, we don't yell or scream or harass each other. We talk to each other. And if we can do that and keep it civil, maybe the whole world one day can set aside their differences and share a beer with each other.